Hi ho, it's Chocolate, a long time no see. It's time for a companion video for my build recommendation guide. So let's get into it, as usual, top to bottom, and I'm going to talk more in depth about the standout units. So first up, Rima. She is currently probably the best tank in Arena, just by virtue of doing a little bit of everything. She's important for position manipulation, and when we don't have Yukari 6-star yet, so for most teams they will need a Rima in front if they want to have backline or midline units walk up. And also on defense, she just does a lot of stuff. She's extremely tanky by herself and has a lot of important utility for many matchups. So yeah, that's Rima, and she is R15, like basically all the tanks that are PvP only, which are Miyako and Kuka, both of them just R15. Jun can go to R15, I think. I'm keeping mine R14 because I haven't seen any need to go up for PvE yet, so I'm just gonna make sure that she can always reach the best timings on the second and subsequent UBs to get that shield up in case it's needed. But yeah, for CB and PvP I don't really see any use for her anymore, so that's why it's possible to be a bit more conservative on that front. Or Kuka, still one of the very best defensive tanks in Arena, because she is so very hard to kill in certain combinations and forms one of the only good double tank defensive comps. So yeah, for her, just R15 if you're PvP only, and if you're keeping her low for CB, then just keep her as is and don't go above R14. With Kaori, R15, even though she's not really used anymore. NYaru, R15. Peko, R15. Ruka, just as is for CB, or R15 for PvP. So, Nyue Kokoro, we're getting into one of the new units that are coming up. And for her it's kind of interesting. She's not really all that good for hardcore CB. She's pretty good for Arena, but where she really shines is for casual CB and auto CB, because she simplifies a lot of comps. Like, if you recall a lot of the difficult bosses, the last couple CBs, we don't really have to worry about those kinds of bosses that much with Nyue Kokoro, because she allows you to make very simple teams that don't need a lot of intervention. Like, they can be either full order or very simple manual, and you can work with that. So she's very nice on that front, and she's also very nice in PvP. She's the first pure physical focus taunt tank, which is nice, but in general, yeah, she just does a lot of things. She has a very good balance, and she has very nice buffs on her as well, which is also the reason that for pure hardcore CB, in case you're keeping her for that, it's better to keep her 3-star and with a low rank until she's actually used. I think most of her uses aren't really that sensitive and are after star down, but yeah, it just depends on your own willingness to take risks in that regard in exchange for being better at PvP, for example. So Nozomin, R15, Mimi, R15, and in one of those cases for her, I think it's mostly 15-4, and even with a slight level adjust, so be careful in that regard until you know which timelines you're using for her. But yeah, for her, just still R15, and probably with the armor off. For Makoto, also R15 obviously, and either armor on or off depending on the timeline. So yeah, just check that out depending on which one you're going with. For Kaya, R15, Nyue Hyori R15, and Ninon also R15, both waiting for UE. Akino R15, as Makoto R15, and next CB is for her one of the big 3-star uses, which is very important because purely 5-star can't hit C3 as well as 3-star can. So it's one of the really big uses for 3-star for her, just in time for her to kind of be relegated to the 1 physical comp after CB23, because CB23 there's not much room for physical, considering it's either double or triple NYaru comps, but CB24 she can come back again, and at that point I think it's mostly 5-star again. So yeah, and for her also, depending on the timeline, she either needs armor off, especially for the 3-star version, she does need a 15-4, but for the 5-star version I think it's mostly with the armor on. But yeah, just check your timeline, make sure the timings aren't affected by having it on. Chloe R15, Matsuri R15, Eriko not used, Ayane R15, and for her it's interesting kind of because without incoming damage and depending on buffs, she can want 15-4 for some phase 1 bosses, but later bosses she mostly wants 15-5. Like on the left side she gets the pure tank armor, so unlike someone like, for example, S Makoto, who has some pre-attack and pre-crit on the armor, Ayane doesn't get any offensive stats, but because of how her UB works, you do want it for safety, because with 15-5 she oftentimes just wants a self-crit, but with 15-4 she can kill herself, so be careful in that regard. So yeah, I foresee once we hit phase 3 it's going to be 15-5 all the way, but until then make sure that you don't pre-rig her, so to speak, even though most of the issues are just going to be whether she kills herself or not with a self-crit. Mugi R15, Hyori R15, Misogi R15, Ayane R12, H Misogi R15, Tamaki R15, and for Tamaki, maybe you've noticed since IO 6-star is now in the meta in a major way, Tamaki also became a little bit better in all regards, just as a way to keep her in check for some comps where you want a frontliner that can deal with her. Tomo R15, S-Tama R15, Eriko R15, and again, as usual with units that can be a little bit finicky, just make sure mid-left doesn't affect timings before putting it on. Peko R15, Kurumi R15, Jita R15, shouldn't be any issues with her in terms of the mid-left piece. Ray R15, and now Christmas Ilya R15. So next new unit, also the one that's upcoming next for her. It's kind of interesting. So she's the highest DPS mage we have to date, and obviously unfortunately she will get replaced by NYaru immediately, but she is still very interesting in that she's a fixed Ilya. She self-damages with her skill 2, but it's percentage based and it can't crit. So that's kind of nice, and it has the interesting effect that because all her skill damage and UB damage is based on how low her HP is, that you kind of have this dynamic where her HP goes low from incoming damage and from self-damage, and then she heals back up with her skills and especially with her UB, which does insane amounts of damage when properly used. So that's kind of interesting, and her EVs also self-correct in a way, in that if she crits a lot, she deals less damage with her skills than UB, because her HP is higher from the self-steal, self-lifesteal. But if she doesn't crit a lot, her HP will dip lower and she will deal a little bit more damage. So there's that dynamic. And also, since her self-damage still gives her TP, it's also that if she self-damages at high HP, obviously she's gonna gain more TP from taking more damage. So there's some interesting stuff going on with her. I've put 4+ here, which might be a mistake, but there are 4-star timelines, and that's mainly for those who don't want to burn too many DAs on her. Like, I can see a lot of people pulling her on 3 pulls, and since you get 100 DA, it's pretty cheap to 4-star her, but maybe they don't want to invest for 5-star for a unit that's going to be pretty niche afterwards. So yeah, you can use her at 4-star, but just know 5-star is definitely better, especially when used on C1, because 4-star just doesn't work on C1 properly, so keep that in mind. Next up, Christmas Ilya, X-Chrissy I mean. So for X-Chrissy we already have her, and so she as well 4+, except for her it's mostly 4-star. There are a couple timelines that want 5-star for damage greed, but for the most part you want to keep her 4-star, which is nice for DA, and again 15-4, 15-5 depending on what you need for timings. She's a very interesting unit, and since she's Fizz, she's not completely pushed out of the meta forever. She kind of comes up every now and again, since she has some nice mechanics in terms of being able to tank swap, having a coin mechanic where every second UB does a lot of damage and switches her back to pure DPS route, and the UB after always puts her into a state where she does more party buffs, which includes a TP boost buff. So a very interesting unit. You're going to see a lot of her on certain overflows later when comp change happens, and also for certain other timelines where she just fits. One other thing of note is her bonds give TP boost to regular Chrissy, which is sometimes important for when she gets UE, because that adds a TP charge to her overload skill. So at that point there's going to be times where you can get UB on Chrissy with 2s or 1 attack and her buff, or just her buff, and yeah, there's going to be breakpoints where having the TP boost from X-Chrissy is going to be important for that, and other times it won't matter, but just keep that in mind, that there will be times where the TP boost is necessary, so you'll have to borrow Chrissy if you don't have X-Chrissy. Next up, Shizuru R15, Chrissy R15, X-Kurumi R15. She's a little bit of a letdown, to be honest. On attack she's really not that useful, and on defense also kind of difficult to use, because IO counters her so hard. Because the issue is, even though it takes multiple hits to go through her channel to break it, if she gets disabled, like for example with a global charm, then it's instantly cancelled. So yeah, not the best conditions for X-Kurumi to do stuff. She's very good against Reno, but still, yeah, for the current meta, just didn't really hit it off, unfortunately. Mimi R15, Shinobu R15 for C5 next CB, so she's going to be used again, one of the last times I think. So if you're still keeping her low, then I guess that's you, but I think for most people she should just go up to R15 and whichever one she's used at. HMimi R15, again she's going to see some use, especially for B4 next CB. I'm going to go into all that in my video that's upcoming. Shizuru, just as she was, sees some major use again. Mahiru R15, Yukari as she was, R12 this time is very important, especially if we get unbugged C1, she's going to be important for the Exilia comp for that. R14 and R13 won't work, so hope you have R12. Monica R15, Ninon R15, Exnozo R15. And for Exnozo, yeah, I already said to a couple people, just put her background on your home screen and lick it, because she's not really all that good anywhere else. Mihuyu R15, Ilya R15, even though for Ilya her time's proper over now, I don't think we use her anymore. Eskauri R15, Saren either R15 or iceboxed at wherever she is currently. Anna R15, H Shinobu R15, S Mifuyu R15, and Kokoro. She has multiple builds for next CB, especially most people want to know about the loops. I'm going to go into it more deeply in my CB video, but just know R14 can work and R10, but for the best timelines you do want R10. There's multiple that work, but there has to be a certain amount of tankiness for it to be humanly doable. And if you do stuff like SIO loop, then R14 is perfectly workable. So yeah, basically any Kokoro can work next CB, I think. Ayumi R15, Grea R15, S Kokoro R10 or R14, and just a reminder, once we get carryover comp change, S Kokoro can be used again, so keep her in mind for that. Rem, either R12 or R15, doesn't really matter at the moment until she gets UE. Ram, R14 still, because of the TP boost. Rin, R14, same but with TP retain. Mitsuki, R15. Akari, whatever she currently is. Yori, R15. S Saren, R9 or R15, whichever yours is. And maybe if there is one comp that requires R14, maybe she can give up, but I think R9 works for all the important ones. So yeah, you can preserve that if you have it. H Miyako, R15, Arisa, R15, Anne, R14. Do not go up with her. She already is losing out in terms of being a DPS, and once we get NYaru, that's even more pronounced, even though I don't think there's much use for her until her UE, but still, R14 to preserve any chance of using her still. Lu, R14 or R15. I think R15 is the better one for the loops next CB. She's the best DPS unit for C4 loops. And yeah, R15 is better in terms of crit and M attack, and R14 has slightly more TP boost, but I think with how loops work, R15 probably wins out in terms of damage. Neneka, R14 forever until R18, I think. Tiaoi, R15, unless you're one of the ice boxers who still keeps her R11. NYaru, I'm gonna go into her in a separate video, but yeah, for her there's gonna be builds R14 and R16 on coming out. The safe build is just 3-star R14, but there's gonna be burrow builds at basically all stars, 3, 4, 5, and either R16 or R14 for each of those. Just depends on how clans decide to set up their NYaru strategy. Rino, R15, Suzuna, R15, Asuzuna, R15, Shiori, R15, Ayo, R15, SIO, R15 too, if you are a pure PvP player, but obviously for loops, R11 still. So she's one of the easier units to make work for next CB for the loop, and currently she is just our healer of choice with low tankiness, since she's a native 1-star unit, which is makes it easy to keep her at low tankiness for loops and stuff like that. So yeah, but there's other options, and again I'm gonna go into that in my CB video. Suzume R14, which was interesting because last CB she was usable in autocoms, which saved my ass for my ults, where I kind of ran out of usable comps for C4 and she came in clutch. So New Year Suzume, I was talking about SIO, how she was the squishy healer of choice, and New Year Suzume kind of replaces her, since she has a large action speed boost on her UB. That makes her really nice, since if she gets buffed up, she can full heal the whole team anyway, even though her heal is kind of small. So make sure to icebox her on release and just go up as much as necessary each time, because she is really powerful and really nice to have in her proper frozen esports state, because she can basically run a lot of comps that would be very difficult to achieve otherwise. Emilia R15 or Icebox, Kasumi Icebox or R15, and she will come into use with CB23. So at that point it's going to be a choice between proper Icebox, so level 142 or 141 depending on whether UE is on or not, or going to max level. The esport gear is still useful, but there's going to be a choice that needs to be made between having to use cringe level adjusts or just going max level and skipping out on a couple timelines where you have to borrow her instead. So that's going to be dependent on what your clan does and whether you want to go maximum autism or not. Misato, just wherever she was. Nanaka R15, Yui, whatever she was. NYaru R15, Hatsune R15, Misaki R15, Luna, whichever she was. I think there's last CB we went to 14.6 on basically the whole clan, and I kept some ice boxes on my alts, and some clans went 14.2 all the way, which is, yeah, you'll see. For example, for C2 next CB, there's going to be a slight difference where R14.2 gets slightly better RNG but lower personal damage on her, and R14.6 gets slightly worse RNG but slightly better personal damage. So there's going to be a trend of that where it's just a trade-off and you just pick whichever you like more. X-Chica, I'm going to go into her specific builds in my CB video, but just know for next CB I think it's perfectly fine to build her, since that loop is probably the lowest build you're ever going to realistically use her at. There's others which are slightly lower, I think just a very tad bit less tanky than what's used next CB, but those aren't really mainstream and can be easily replaced. So next CB I think is a good time to get started with building X-Chica if you want to loop. As Suzume, either R15 or just Icebox wherever she is. As NYaru R14, very important for her because her UEB directly allows her to adjust her timings for Shred, and since she's mainly going to be used for Shred for the next couple CBs, that's really important. So yeah, R14. Aoi, R14 or R15, depending on whether you value the accuracy or tankiness. Chica, hopefully you kept her Icebox as much as possible, because next CB C4 the best comps are with Chica and with a very specific build. So yeah, that's what we are going to be using her for, and after that there's going to be more similar uses a couple times for her. So yeah, very nice for Chica fans. Esmahu R14, very important for a UB dependent unit like her, where most of the damage comes from UB. Maho, keep as is. It's still some time until we get 6-star, but once that happens it's gonna pay off. Yui, keep as is. Yuki, R15 or Sandbox for pure CB use. There's gonna be use for him CB23 when we use him in triple NYaru routes and certain NYaru comps, regardless of whether it's double or triple NYaru. Kyoka, R14 or R15 depending on timeline. I think mostly it's going to be R15 because she scales so well with M-Crit. Then Halloween Misakui, R15, and Halloween Kyoka, R14. There's one case I think where 14.2 is important to have, where R14.6 doesn't really work. So yeah, hopefully yours isn't bricked for that. And yeah, still looking for R12 uses. I haven't found any yet, but who knows, maybe there are some. So yeah, that's it. Look forward to a CB video where I go into the timelines we are using next CB, which units are important and how it works, and I'll give some future look for when NYaru comes. So that's it from me. Hope you have a great day and this guide is useful to you. Bye bye.